Hello, everyone. I don't know who everyone is. People tend not to be sitting around waiting at the beginning of a stream. So we'll see.
Especially a book discussion stream.
Yeah, exactly. Colton has promised he'll be watching, but otherwise, I have no idea.
As did Kev. Kev, if you're not here, how dare
Yeah, well, right now it says it's telling me that 4 people are watching. So somebody is in the chat. Anyway, what's the idea? The idea is, for those of you who didn't see it, a little while ago, my friends Joanna and Josh and I, or our friends, I should say, we run a Discord together called The Fireside. And we had a fun idea that we were going to do a TBR surprise. So each of us kind of picked a book for someone else in our group. And Evie sort of joined late.
Pokey.
And she sort of joined and unjoined and joined again at the last minute, which was awesome. I'm glad she did. And the book that was picked for me by Josh was Boy's Life. And then the idea was with Evie, because she joined late and we didn't have that much of a plan with her, she was just going to get a book picked by each of us to read with us and then do a live chat about it. And I, having just gotten Boy's Life on my TBR from Josh, decided Evie needs to read it too, and we'll read it together. And we did. So this is our chat. So here is Urza. I'm assuming Urza was in the sprints that you were just in.
Yep.
Rogue is here. Anitha, I know, was in the sprints you were just in. Cara, but you can call me Caroline, is here.
She also was in the sprints.
Also was in the sprints. So basically, it sounds like everybody that was just in Alan's sprints came over
I
here.
bullied them into joining. So
Okay,
this chat. So
perfect. Bullying people is also a form of marketing. Yeah. So
it's a form of caring as well. So
exactly. You don't bully friends you don't care about. We read this book together. So I would say, just to start with, let me actually pull up my notes. Oh, damn it. I need to sign in again.
Hey, Colton's here.
Better be. Otherwise, he's a fake fan. I think we can officially decide that John Minton is actually a fake fan. Because he's not here. No, that's not true. He had a prior engagement on, I think, Joanna's channel. And yeah.
I think you're talking about some little book called Return to a Dan by some guy.
Yeah, whatever. Who's ever even heard of that shit? So yeah, he's mostly forgiven. But just what we're going to do, I would say we'll start out and maybe it'll be, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour, spoiler free. Just our general impressions and very generally what the book's about and that kind of thing. And then we will get into spoilers, and I will put up a banner. So once we've gotten into spoilers, you will know that we are doing spoilers. You won't be able to miss it. Don't worry. So that answers Pepper's question. Welcome, Peppers. So yeah, it'll be spoiler free to start with. And that hopefully will get you hyped for reading the book soon. And then we'll get to the meaty, interesting stuff. Urza's never even heard of the book or the author. Interesting.
To be fair, I hadn't before either. So
I actually hadn't either. I mean, I hadn't heard of it before BookTube. I think last year someone read it, and I want to say Joanna read it last year, but I know Joanna read it, and she was she said to me recently, it's the best book she ever read that she wasn't over the moon about. So she didn't love it, but of the books she didn't love, it was the best one. So yeah. I never really had it on my radar, my list. until Colton kept turning up in the Sunday pub and saying over and over again that one must read Robert McCammon. And John Minton from Talking Story also gave a pitch for the beginning of the series that McCammon has, which starts with Speaks the Nightbird. And he gave a like 1 minute review statement sales pitch for Speaks the Nightbird. And I was like, damn.
Yeah.
I have to read that. That like could just be John Minton going nuts. But yeah.
So Kev, I know, is in the midst of, I think he either just finished or he's still reading book 3, Mr. Slaughter, and he's loving it.
No, I've heard only positive things about it.
Yeah, so
and I've got Speaks the Nightbird already.
Hey, there you go.
Waiting in line. Let me answer Colton quickly. What happened to Dan? Dan, I had a spontaneous last minute idea that Dan from Black and Blue Collar Reader, good friend of mine, that he would join us.
Are you implying that Dan and I are not friends?
It's not for me to say. You can say he's a good friend of yours. That's fine with me.
I'm just kidding.
Sorry. When we started reading Boy's Life, he was reading Swan Song, also by Robert McCammon. He was loving it. We were texting back and forth about comparing the two, sort of. And then when we finished Boy's Life, he started Boy's Life. And just because of the timing, I wrote him and I was like, dude, like you'll be done by the time we do our live chat. Why don't you join us? And he said, I'm taking my boys fishing. So he is taking his boys fishing, which is why he's not on the screen or in the chat. And I hope he's having a great time.
That is the greatest excuse. So I hope he gets a big one, as it were.
Exactly. Matt Keane has heard of him, but always in comparison to King, which we'll get into. I think that's an interesting thing. So
I'll just say real quickly. So Kev is the one who really put Robert McCammon on my radar. I'm sure people talked about him before, but Kev is the one that was like, you need to read Boy's Life. Please, for the love of God, read Boy's Life. And then Colton, you sweet, sweet, sweet man, read and loved Spirit Cuts Through Water. He's like, I feel like you need to read Boy's Life because it's
you own me now.
Yeah.
I loved your book.
Yeah, so, when one person says, hey, I really think you need to read a book, I'm just like, okay, fine, sure, whatever. But when a second person is like, hey, you really need to read this book, I'm like, all right. So, yeah.
This was also a weird thing. Like, it started with Joanna, but a bunch of people, like numerous people, specifically told me, they were like, you are going to love Boy's Life. Yeah. Like a lot of people might not love Boy's Life, but you are going to love Boy's Life. And I think it was mostly because of my Something Wicked This Way Comes review, which I just loved that book. And I immediately bought the Folio Society special edition of it. And it's just a gorgeous book that I will read many times more before I die. And I think because of that, it does share some similarities. So just really, really broadly in general, what was your impression of the book? What did you think?
To step back before I answer that question, Matt, I had also heard the comparisons to Keane, which made me, even though I had the specific recommendations from Kev and from Colton that I would love this book and that I need to read it, I was very hesitant because of those comparisons to Keane, who I notoriously have had a not great reading relationship with. So I was very hesitant. So broadly, what was the question? What was the specific question again?
Well, actually, I was thinking, it just occurred to me, that's actually a stupid question. Why don't we start with, what's the book about? The book is about, I think,
A Boy's Life.
A Boy's Life. Yeah, exactly. It's what's on the package. I think his name's Corey. He is, I think, 11 when the book starts. And by the end, he's 12 or maybe 13. It's roughly, I think, about a year in his life. there is the whole thing is set in a very southern, very small town in
Alabama.
Alabama, and it's in the 1960s, mid 1960s. I think it starts in 64, and rampant racism is still a thing, and the whole town's pretty redneck, and it's just a typical kind of mid 60s small town in the South in America. And there is it's kind of the inciting incident, so I don't think it's really a spoiler. There is a murder, which of course in a small town like that doesn't necessarily happen that much. Actually, nowadays it does, but back in the 60s, it was probably pretty rare. And it proceeds from there. It's hard to not call it almost fantasy, or at least magical realism. And the whole book treads this sort of line between how much of what looks fantastic in the book is the perception of a boy, where before you lose your innocence, the world is more wondrous. There's more wonder in the world. And how much of it is actually, this actually happened this way, you know?
Yeah.
And very generally, I would say it almost, but not quite, feels like a bunch of short stories.
Mhm.
Like each chapter has a thing, pretty much. And that thing is sort of introduced, dealt with, and then the next chapter has a thing. But there is this sort of background running, you know, there was a murder and how did that happen and who did it and whatever. But it's very background at times.
Yeah, it's not the focus. I would
Yeah.
say I would say it's more episodic in
Yeah.
its narrative. So, but yeah. Yeah, and murder mysteries is an anti-buzzword for me. So that was another thing that I was like very hesitant on. I heard like, oh, it's involves a murder. I'm like, oh, no.
But it's totally not about that.
It's not about that, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, we were both pretty
Spoiler
damn
alert, I loved it.
psyched.
So
Yeah. Yeah, spoiler alert right from the beginning, both of us loved it. And Evie ugly cried more than once. I don't really cry when I read books, but I was moved for sure.
you need to get in touch with your emotions there, Matt.
Yeah, I know. I actually wish I could like, there are moments where I feel like what I'm reading right now and the way I'm feeling, I probably should be crying, but I just don't. It just doesn't happen.
Blame it on, you being Australian, German, European,
confused. Yeah.
Confused.
I have no idea. Anyway, yeah, we both loved it. I also wasn't sure. I actually like crime books myself. I don't read them very often, but when I have, I enjoy them. I certainly like crime television. And the idea of a murder mystery is kind of what I went in with. So I wasn't disappointed because it's not really about a murder mystery. But yeah, I was kind of expecting that. And it felt at the beginning like that was what was going to be going on. And then you're like, oh, actually, it's not really about that. It's more about how the town deals with it, how Corey and his family deal with it, and how it affects a lot of different people. It's much more about that than actually discovering who done it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a police procedural by any means, because the main character, and it's a first person character. So it's the main character is an 11-year-old boy, not a cop. And yeah. Very, very emotionally moving, very sad in places. Very joyful in other places as well. I don't know what your childhood, Evie, was like. I mean, obviously you were a girl in your childhood, so in some ways probably different from a boy. But this reminded me a lot of my childhood. From the perspective, not from the small southern racist town.
Yeah, so by the way, in case anyone's watching this back, what I just said was a joke. But yeah. Anyways, yeah, so for I grew up in a small southern town, and I very much felt connected to that aspect. Um, but I was not like, I at the same time, I also didn't have, and I just told this to Kev, as I was reading, I was like, I'm not really connecting to Corey's experiences, not because, oh, he's a boy. It's just like I didn't have the group of friends that I would, I wouldn't go out and just roam the neighborhood. We lived out in the middle of nowhere where there was
Right.
nothing to do, and we couldn't ride bikes to get to town because it was too far away. So I couldn't connect to the story in that regard. Um, but I that it still wound up connecting with me despite that disconnect, if that makes
Right.
sense. That seems
Yeah.
like counterintuitive, but
No, I mean, we read fantasy about people
yeah,
who are doing magic and swinging swords for a living,
yeah,
and we still connect to them as characters, even though we're not doing those things ourselves, you know?
yeah. So I will say that going back to the murder mystery, I was surprised that again, even though murder mystery is like one of my biggest, if not biggest, anti buzzwords, um the further we got away, not the further we got away, but the less focused we were on the actual like murder aspect of it and what happened, I was just like, can we go back to that? I want to find out what happens.
Could someone solve this?
Yeah, yeah, what's happening?
Yeah.
And he just kind of like drip fed this the murder
Yeah.
mystery aspect of it, um, while exploring this boy's life in
Yeah.
Corey. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's very, I mean, I think the comparisons, I've heard the McCammon King comparisons before. I think they're justified. It is, I actually like Stephen King's writing. I've enjoyed numerous books by him, and I loved The Dark Tower. But also in other books I've read from him, which isn't that many, but he does coming of age quite well, and it's one of his recurring themes in a lot of his books. He does small town slice of life really well, and it's in a lot of his books. He does a weird mix between seems like it's normal, but there's something weird going on, supernatural-ish, in a lot of his books, and that's totally what Boy's Life is. Um, I think the writing of the two authors is different. Like the style they write in is quite different. I found the writing style to be a lot more flowery, not over flowery, but a lot more flowery than I expected. King's writing tends to be pretty straightforward. He doesn't get into complicated words or
yeah.
complicated word structures or poetic language or anything like that. And I found McCammon a lot more poetic than King.
So I think that obviously that was very intentional. I would say that's very intentional, but I feel like that's in all authors are hopefully intentional with their writing style choices, but you kind of expect that with the like the preface that isn't a preface before it starts, where Corey as the narrator, which by the way, in case anyone hasn't read it, it is the character of Corey telling his life story, well, telling his childhood story as an older man. So you
Yeah.
get his perspective for the first couple of pages, and reading those first few pages before you get into the meat of the story, really sets the tone
Yeah.
of the narrative style, the story he's going to tell, just the themes, everything about it. And what was it he says? I haven't noted here. So he talks about memory and magic, and it's like, I need the memory of magic if I'm ever going to conjure magic again, and then in me are the memories of a boy's life spent in that realm of enchantments. And that's so I expected this like more magical prose style.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's I mean it goes even further. Like I know that some people are allergic to poetry. But I really like poetry. I had a very bad attitude about it until university, and then I had a very good poetry teacher in university who taught me what awesome shit poetry is. And I always recommend, like, if you're reading poetry in a book, even if it's just like a preface or a epigraph or whatever, read it out loud, because poetry is meant to be vocalized. Yeah, it's not just for paper. But right at the beginning of the book, even before that preface that you were talking about, there's a poem which I will read. I may not read all of it. It's a little bit long. We ran like young wild furies where angels feared to tread. The woods were dark and deep. Before us, demons fled. We checked Coke bottle bottoms to see how far was far. Our worlds of magic wonder were never reached by car. We loved our dogs like brothers, our bikes like rocket ships. We were going to the stars. To Mars, we'd make round trips. We swung on vines like Tarzan and flashed Zorro's keen blade. And we were James Bond in his Aston. We were Hercules unchained. We looked upon the future and we saw a distant land where our folks were always ageless and time was shifting sand. We filled up life with living, with grins, scabbed knees, and noise. In glass, I see an older man, but this book's for the boys. And like when I read that, I was like, okay, I get it. Like if you really let poetry sink in, he's writing about the magical world of simply being a child, you know, not just specifically a boy. I mean, of course, maybe especially in the 60s, I guess, a boy's experience was different than a girl's experience, very different. But
although
just
we could get into that later.
Yeah. But just this, there was a very obvious intention in how poetic at times the language was. I mean, it's not flowery poetic all the time, but there were particular moments where something kind of, where to Corey's perception, something kind of magical was happening. And then the language kind of ramps up a little bit and it does get more poetic and more magical feeling, so that you really feel the experience of what Corey is experiencing.
Mhm.
And I thought he did that extremely, extremely well. And it's also, I mean, the very King reminiscent thing also, although it's obviously it's not exclusive to King, is this small town full of lots of weird characters. You know, King does it a lot, and I think he does it really well. But that's this book too. You know, it's very much it's a small town, and there are lots of strange characters that stretch belief at some points. And one of the things I particularly liked about this magicalness that is this boy's life is at the beginning, I felt very much like the magic was in Corey's perception. And the further the book goes on, the more real it feels.
Mhm.
You know, like by the end, I'm like, no, this is just a magical world. Like this is actually magical realism. These things are actually happening in the world. It's not just a kid's imagination embellishing things. There's a particular scene towards the beginning and a particular scene towards the end, which we'll get to after spoilers start, where comparing the two of those, I was like, okay, things are different now, you know? And it's very much about the loss of innocence. You know, the journey you make through experiences from being an innocent child to being a young person.
Yep.
Do we have more thoughts we want to get into before we turn on the spoiler alarm?
No, I just want to get into it, honestly. So
Okay, I would say let's give people in the chat who maybe haven't read it. I don't know who has and hasn't read it. I know Colton's read it. And Karen says she's read all of McCammon, loved the Corbett series. But anybody who maybe hasn't read it and has non-spoiler related questions, or anybody who has non-spoiler related questions about the book or thoughts on it, whatever, throw them in now or forever hold your peace, because we will be turning on the spoiler alarm shortly. Anybody.
5, 4, 3. Sorry. 3, 2, 1.
2.
Did you
Okay,
say
Rogue,
2?
Rogue has also read it.
Is it 2 or 2?
That's 2.
Crazy.
I mean, if you're counting German. Yeah, this is 1. If you start
That's
from
a
here,
thumb. No, that's a thumb.
but there's only one of them. That's 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's weird. It doesn't look like we have any people who haven't read who have questions. So let the spoilers begin. So you look like you have something to say.
Well, I was gonna say, do you want to go chapter by chapter? Do you just want to go like random characters? Because I got the 4 things that I want to talk about, like main things. But I could go chapter by chapter.
I think we can just jump into it. I mean, the people who've read it have read it, and I know what we're talking about. And we only lost 2 people by turning on the spoiler alarm. So go for it.
Okay.
What's your first thing?
So when they get out of school for the summer, and they Corey and his friends ride their bike, and they literally start flying.
Yeah.
And they sprout their wings along with the dogs sprouting their wings.
Yeah.
That was one of the most joyously beautiful scenes I have read in my entire life.
Yeah.
It was
it's amazing.
Yes, Colton, it gave me chills.
Yeah.
And just thinking about it, like, it's just, and then just knowing what happened later, spoiler alert, also, I will start crying when I talk about Rebel, okay?
Let's not talk about Rebel to start with.
Quite yet. So
yeah. Although those 2 scenes, I mean, we're talking to people who've read it now, and those 2 scenes were what I was talking about. Like the flying scene at the beginning, it started out and I was like, is it really that supernatural a book? and then after a while you realize this is definitely imagination embellished. You know, it's just expressing the feeling of like being free for the summer, the last day of school. I mean, I can remember it. Like, it's just like, okay, I'm going to the pool and I'm free now and I can do whatever the hell I want for a while. You know?
And when he mentions it in the narrative, and I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he alludes to that feeling, and he says that it was like, it wasn't just that it was like, so he knows that it's the imagery, the feeling of it all that he's describing, rather than the actual like tangible thing.
I also love, I mean, it's a group of 4 boys who are best friends and they hang out all the time together. And every one of them has a bike. The bike has a name, and every one of them has a dog. You know, and it's just like they're almost cookie cutter boys. You know, they're like, each one of them is exactly the same in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously they're not. They have different personalities and things. Yeah, and the fact that their dogs sprout wings and fly with them was just gorgeous. Yeah, it's just such an amazing scene. But it also sort of very concretely, pretty early in the book, set up this, you know, is this a supernatural book? Is this really supernatural? And then sort of at the end of it, it makes it clear, no, that scene wasn't actually supernatural. It was imaginary. But it's something that he plays with throughout the entire book. Like, we don't need to get into details, but the Rebel's end, so to speak, that was like certifiably actually supernatural. you know, because other people actually witnessed what happened. And it could have been him as a kid, you know, I've had a pet die who suffered for a longer time and was taking medication and stuff. It could have been a kid sort of filtering that experience through a supernatural-ish perception of the world, but it seemed like it felt more like the supernatural was actually happening later on in the book, you know, and almost kind of backed up by adults witnessing it as well. But yeah, that was such a beautiful and moving evocation of just a feeling. You know, it was just like giving a sort of physical form to a feeling. It was just amazing.
And I really appreciate and admire how McCammon did that in each episodic chapter. He evoked some sort of feeling or emotion, whether that be sadness, joy, fear, the Corey being what is it, by the mayor or whatever, and he thinks that the mayor's gonna like kill him, and I'm like, this is
That
giving
whole
me anxiety.
that whole scene,
Hysterical as well.
that whole scene in the mayor's office where he runs out and like
he's trying to kill me. Oh God, yeah.
And I was so like, great. It could be that he is, you know.
Yeah, I genuinely, I'm like, is this gonna happen?
I was like, I'm pretty sure this is going to go into a Corey insanely overreacted results at the end, but it was still like I was still a little on the edge of my seat. I was like, is the mayor actually the murderer, and he's trying to cover it up? And I mean, there were all these hints, like the hat and the feather, and you know, that all seemed like maybe could be the mayor. And it turns out that the mayor was just completely confused. That whole scene was hilarious. I mean, it was tense. It was really tense, and then it was hilarious. Yeah, no, it's so well written. I would say anybody who's very skeptical about reading a Stephen King book doesn't need to fear this book. Like, because it shares a lot of surface similarities with Stephen King, but I don't feel like I read a Stephen King book at all, you know. And I've read a few. Yeah, that was also sort of a recurring theme or perspective that I thought he did really, really well, was not understanding things or misunderstanding things as a kid, because you just don't have the context you have when you're an adult. You don't have the experience and the background information and the knowledge that you have maybe, you know, 10, 20 years later. That would never happen to an adult in that situation, you know, and like you wouldn't put things together that way. But when you're a kid, like everything is kind of mysterious and everything is kind of confusing. And little things could set you off, you know, where
everything is amplified. Everything is just so intense. And
yeah.
And
I mean, it's also in a way, I didn't read many of them. I wasn't that into it, but like when I was a kid, I read some of the Hardy Boys mysteries, and that scene specifically is kind of a Hardy Boys world. You know, the Hardy Boys did get into situations where an adult had done something bad and they put clues together and figured it out. And Corey's a kid who is into sci-fi films and monster films and, you know, amazing adventure stories and that kind of thing. So it totally fit that he was putting those things together in his head, you know?
Yeah. It's sorry, I'm just trying to find what the crap was this chick's name?
The lady.
The girl he falls in love with, that is
Child Willow.
Yes, thank you. Anyways,
and that's the name of the chapter as well, if you're looking for it.
Thank you. who winds up being the demon's cousin, which was hysterical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, his innocence of, like, even just, like, falling in love, madly in love, unrequited love with Child Willow, and realizing she's a child herself, but she has a child, and she is,
Yeah. I mean, she's like, for him, she's much older than him. You know,
Yeah.
she's 16 and he's 11. And that's
Yeah.
a big difference when you're a kid. And like, I don't know if he really got it to start with,
Yeah.
that she's like a child mother, and you know, she's got a horrible husband, and she's living in a shack, and like is the poorest of the poor people in the town, and everything's just horrible. But him like deifying her instantly was very cute and kind of sad in a way. Like, and I mean, again, like that child's perspective, that on the one hand you completely don't understand what's going on, but on the other hand you're also kind of just taking things for what they are.
There's
It's like,
the
here's a
naivety
beautiful girl.
Yeah. There's the naivety of it all.
Yeah, but I mean, like positive and negative. Naivety always sounds pretty negative, but the like, you or I might go into that shack, and because we're so aware of what's going on and the poverty and the horrible stuff that's going on there, we wouldn't say anything good about it, you know. And he just sees this beautiful girl, you know, and thinks she's the most amazing thing in the world, and immediately falls in love, and is only afterwards a little bit aware of, oh, she's got this horrible guy who's not treating her very well, and
that
she's got
also
a
could be
kid. And
the adult reflecting back, not even him,
yeah,
looking as
yeah,
a child or
not even
whatever.
the kid getting it, the kid just being
Yeah.
like, oh my god, this woman's amazing, you know, and
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
But to completely switch gears, I think the moment, other than them, getting out of school and, them sprouting wings and stuff like that, I think the moment when I truly, like, fell in love with the book and I was like, this could be an all-time favorite book, is not it's the inkling started during it wasn't the parade. It was kind of a parade, but it was after the parade, when the lady and her husband and everybody from, oh my gosh, it starts with a B, the town. Town where the lady lives. Benton? No.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, but I don't
Um
remember it off the top of my head either.
yeah, so when she's feeding the old Moses in the creek, in the river, whatever.
Yeah.
Then there's the whole flood that happens.
The
That
flood was the point where I also went, oh my god, this is a real awesome book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the description of old Moses, the poor dog. Again, the poor dog. It's just so visceral, the description, but so beautiful at the same time. And I was like, man, McCammon has a real just command of his craft. And so good.
That was also the first point where, like, I usually, when I'm reading, I usually have a bit of a somewhat skeptical, critical thinking hat on. You know, I'm trying to keep straight, like in this specific book, I'm like, okay, we've got potentially an unreliable narrator because it's first person and it's a kid, and he's describing all of these amazing, basically magical things happening, but it doesn't seem like it's actually in a magical world. It seems like it's a pretty unmagical world in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know? And so for a long time, pretty much up until the flood, I was like, okay, this kid's got a very active imagination, and it's wonderful to read, but it's not reality in the book. It's not the reality of the world in the book.
Mm.
Old Man Moses and Corey sticking a broom down his throat is the first time where there's a witness. It's not just Corey going on about something in his head and writing about it later, but there was actually someone else there.
Yeah.
And word gets around. And I thought it was really interesting that the Black people talk about it. And he gets rewarded for it. And they accept it because they also live in a more magical world. They have a more magical worldview.
I mean,
And
I
the
guess
white people never really talk about or seem to accept or be excited about or proud of Corey driving off Old Man Moses.
Yeah, so I think it's I mean, again, that's another way that McCammon like explores. There's obviously the racism that he explores in a really nuanced way, but also like direct way at the same time.
Yeah.
With the whole stupid KKK members and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Them Corey and his buddies like camping and then stumbling across the box and
dynamite sale.
Yeah, it was like
in the forest.
I was like, yep, that I can see that happening.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so like there's obviously the racial divide in this town, which technically 2 towns, I guess, but in this community. But there's also like the white people are all Christians. The Black folks are I think he describes them all as hoodoo, but they do like the white people think the Black people are all, voodoo and they're it's Satan and stuff and demons. And so when Corey and his mom visit the lady and there's this like fear that they have in themselves of like, what are we going to walk into? And they literally walk into her house and they see this Christian imagery throughout. They're like,
yeah,
oh, she's just like us.
She's one of us.
And
her house is painted brighter colors, but
yeah,
she's not that different.
Yeah. And it's just the like, I don't know. It's like, again, the people of Zephyr the white people of Zephyr are so closed off of everything and they think they're superior, and that's just it was reading that stuff was just very frustrating in a good way. It was very hard.
Good way? Question mark. Yeah. No, I totally know what you mean. I mean, I loved the Black characters in this book, like all of them. Mr. What's his name? The repair guy, Mr.
Lightfoot.
Lightfoot. Mr. Lightfoot was just hilarious and so charming and droll and dry.
And honest to God, when he showed up at the end and he's at the orphanage, I started getting verklempt. I was like, Mr. Lightfoot's still there. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Lightfoot is awesome. The lady and her husband are awesome.
Real quickly, because I don't have much to say other than the lady's husband de-armed. No, was it? No, it was Mr. Lightfoot that de-armed the bomb, right? That fell on.
Yeah.
The KKK. Okay.
Yeah.
That was amazing. That
whole scene with him and the KKK was
leader guy, whatever.
Yeah, but he was the
sheriff.
He was the sheriff. That's right. Was he the sheriff?
I think so.
It's been a few weeks now, and my memory sucks.
Oh no, he implicated the sheriff. That's right, because the sheriff had to step down, and that's when what's his face took over. Jack.
Yeah. Him, like Mr. Lightfoot defusing the bomb and just the
tapping it like, you talk to me. I know what you're doing.
But just the banter between them as well, and how amazingly patient Mr. Lightfoot was with this foaming at the mouth racist, and still seeing, yes, he's a horrible person. Yes, he hates me and anyone who looks like me, but he's a person. And if I can save him, I'm gonna, like that was just like unbelievable heroism to me. I was like, everybody else in the town has run away from you.
And honestly, I think for me, for the motivation for Mr. Lightfoot was less saving this racist piece of crap and more, there's something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
I'm the one.
I fix things. That's what I do. It's who I am. Yeah. And just, I think also just like technical curiosity. It's like, oh, I've never taken a bomb apart, but I know I can.
Him saying something, it was something in the regards of like, man, if I clip the wrong one first, this last one's make or break it, Oh, so
it's also really interesting that the way I saw the whole town kind of was like the kids, some of them anyway, Corey and his friends certainly, they have a magical view of the world, right? Pretty much all of the white people do not at all, like the adults. They're very practical. They don't do anything magical, and they aren't magical themselves, and they don't see anything magical happen. And the black people, because of the connection, which is never, I mean, it's very much implied that they are actually voodoo people. I mean, that the lady at least is a voodoo priestess or whatever, but they're also Christian, right? So they have a connection to the world, the accepted world of the white people, but they're still magic because they're also voodoo. And I mean, they're presented as magic. Like Lightfoot literally can fix anything. And he does kind of talk to machines.
Yeah.
And he gets responses from them that make sense to him. I mean, he is kind of a magical character. And the bike that they gift Corey, Rocket has an eye. And
but again, does he really?
Is Corey only perceiving that, but there's also kind of a hint when he's talking to the lady after he's had the bike for a while, like the way the two of them are talking about the bike, it's alive.
Yeah.
It's not just a machine. It's alive.
Yeah.
And I just love how this childish imagination magical view of the world gets validated through the lady and her husband, who's Moon Man.
I mean, thank you, Moon Man. It harkens back to that kind of preface, prologue / thing of Corey as an adult saying, "See, this is my opinion. We all start out knowing magic. We are born with whirlwinds, forest fires, and comets inside us. We are born able to sing to birds and read the clouds and see our destiny in grains of sand. But then we get the magic educated right out of our souls. We get it churched out, spanked out, washed out, and combed out. We get put on the straight and narrow and told to be responsible, told to act our age, told to grow up for God's sake. And you know why we were told that? Because the people doing the telling were afraid of our wildness and youth, and because the magic we knew made them ashamed and sad of what they'd allowed to wither in themselves." And again, that's going back to to not go on a religion rant here,
but
that is a lot of very small town conservative Christian communities. It's a tool for power and control, and that's why the white folks of Zephyr don't see the world the way Corey and his friends do, the way the lady and Moon Man and Mr. Lightfoot do. It's not even see, it's but experience the world.
Experience, yeah.
So
yeah, and I mean, I grew up mostly in really big cities. I was born near Washington, D.C. I've lived in the capital city in lots of different countries. I live in Berlin now, which is fucking huge. I went to the Samurai Museum earlier today, and it took me 50 minutes just to get there. So yeah, I'm used to living in big cities and everything being busy and people around and everything. And big cities tend to be less religious than rural small towns. But in big cities, I think the thing that beats it out of you is business and responsibility. You know, like you have to grow up to be responsible and to make money. And you may not be brought up religious at all, but you still have these very dry, gray kind of things taught to you that are about not seeing the world in any kind of magical way, seeing it in a very practical and mercenary kind of a way, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you read that quote. When I read that quote, I posted it in the quote channel on the Fireside Discord, because I was just like, first of all, that is the soul of the book. That quote is what the book's about. Yeah. That is everything in the book is about that. But it's also just such an awesome quote. I just love it. The story of Corey's father is, for me, a very much one of going through that quote and then coming back to the beginning and like refinding a little belief in wonder and in something magical. Like he's witnessed a horrible thing, and it almost completely destroys him as a person, you know, and he becomes a shell of himself because he's seen this thing, and he doesn't have anything other than the practical reality of it.
Yeah.
That could help him.
And he's not processing it.
He's not processing it in any way, and he's got a solution right from the beginning.
But he refuses.
But it's too. It would require him accepting that his worldview isn't complete.
Yeah.
That there are things that do exist that could have a practical solution for him that he's not willing to accept, because it would require like regressing in a way to a worldview before he'd given up on magic.
Yeah. I will say that I was genuinely, so one, Corey's mom, her constant anxiety over the littlest thing, I'm like, I feel so seen by Corey's mom. Like I have so much anxiety about every little thing. But in relation, going back to talking about Corey's dad, I just seen his decline. I was genuinely afraid that McCammon was going to have Corey's dad commit suicide and kill himself.
I was also planning on, I was bracing myself for a suicide. Yeah. I was also like, okay, this seems to be where this has got to go. I'm glad it didn't go there. I don't really need to read about any suicides right now, but it was the way the book wrapped up. Well, actually, I'm of two minds about how the way the book wrapped up. The way Corey's family story wrapped up, that, you know, dad gave in the end and did go to the lady, and of course the lady could help him because she is fucking magic, and like all of that was perfect. I loved that, you know. The the whole oh, here he is.
There's
Kev sleeping until, what is it? It's almost 9 p.m. Kev.
3 p.m.
Yeah,
Eastern time.
I know. But still, you just slept until 3 p.m. Jesus,
Good for you, Kev. Good for you.
I was out last night all night drinking, and I'm like twice your age, and I got up at 9 this morning and went out and drank more.
I have a hangover just from hearing that.
Yeah, I didn't have a hangover. Last night wasn't too rough. It wasn't that bad.
So
welcome, Kev. The other part of the end, which I'm not so super happy about. Oh, okay. That's forgivable. You're playing Elden Ring until 5 a.m. I know the feeling, actually, Kev. When I get into a certain game, not all games, but some games, I exhibit extremely addictive behavior. So yeah, I know the why can I hear bird singing feeling of playing video games. Yeah. The other thing about the end where I was kind of disappointed because it all felt very convenient and rushed was we have a secret Nazi living amongst us.
That
That whole thing, I was like, nah, I'm not sure I buy it. It's just a bit much, you know?
that did feel a little convenient, but I'm like, you know what? I don't care at this point. Like,
It wasn't about the murder mystery to start with.
yeah. And also, to be fair, like, I'm sure crap, like, I mean, for God's sakes, Nazis went to all over South America. I'm sure they came to America too. So,
Totally.
um,
Yeah, Rogue. I'm not saying I was surprised by it, Rogue. I'm just saying my feeling was you've got a town that is almost run by the KKK. You don't need a secret Nazi war criminal, right? Like you've already got basically Nazis occupying half the town. You don't need to add in an imported Nazi war criminal. But
I did
yeah,
think the way that you were talking, I was like, I thought you were going to talk about like the very end where adult Corey goes back with his wife and daughter. Which, by the way, I love the way that he wrote that, of like not even mentioning that it was like his child was a daughter, just the child,
yeah,
whatever. And then talking about how it's not just a boy's life, it's a girl's life too. And I'm
yeah.
like, oh yes, oh yeah. But I thought you were going to say that you didn't like the end where he sees his ghost father essentially. I lost my ever loving mind at that scene. And especially Corey's dad saying, "You'll always be my boy." Dad says, and then he turns to the house and the porch is empty. I lost my ever loving fucking mind. That was gorgeous.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I don't have any complaints about that.
Okay, good.
Not at all.
We would have to fight about it if you did. It's fine.
Yeah, no, we don't have to fight about it. It just felt to me like the surprise Nazi, the so-called surprise Nazi war criminal, was just a bit irrelevant to like everything else around it. You know,
And it was so like, it's, and on top of that, it was just so like, they take Corey hostage, and it was like on top of it, on top of everything, and I'm like, what is happening?
it felt like a cartoon villain kind of
Yeah.
thing going on, and I was just like, yeah. None of the other characters really felt like cartoons up until that point, and then all of a sudden, the Nazi war criminal and his wife, or actually the Nazi war criminal couple, like, yeah, that bit, I was like, okay, this is maybe gone too far. You could very easily also have just made it any one of the racist assholes in town. But I guess it was a way also to, in a way, that being the solution to the murder mystery, distances the crime from the town. You know, it's like the town didn't do it. This
Right.
weirdo immigrant did it.
Yeah. But it does
So
make sense because like no one knew who the person was. No one was reporting him missing in the area, so he was obviously,
from
not
somewhere
around.
else. Yeah.
But yeah, can we go back to like me crying? Because I want to talk about Rebel.
Let's talk about Rebel.
We're already an hour into this, and we've
Do we want to
talked
talk about Rebel, or do we want to talk about Undead Rebel?
both.
Yeah.
Um, Kev can attest to this. I didn't think if I could finish this book because of the I
Once
was
you
like,
got to Undead Rebel.
no, once I got to Dead Rebel.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think I can finish this book. Like, I don't think I can finish the chapter. I don't think I can finish this book. Like, you might have to tell me, like, I might skip this chapter, whatever. And I'm so glad that I pushed through. Because again, the description is so visceral and disgusting, but yet
Yeah.
beautiful and cathartic.
Yeah.
And to kind of make a connection there, you have this guy who turns out to be a Nazi, but he's the veterinarian. He's taking care of these animals,
Yeah.
and he's the one that saves Rebel, uh, in a way, and he treats Rebel, and he treats Corey's relationship with Rebel with such care and compassion. Um, and obviously Corey's dad's like, "Are you sure you want to see him?" And Corey's like, "Yeah." And I was straight up like hyperventilating reading that chapter. And when Corey prays to God, saying, "Please don't take him, let him live, let him live." And then he comes back as zombie Rebel, essentially.
Yeah.
It's and then just watching him wither away again, but then seeing Corey come to terms with Rebel's no longer my dog. Rebel is now, oh my gosh, what's the little kid who died?
Charlie, I think
Yeah,
was his
Charlie, I
name.
think it was,
Yeah.
who died in the fire. That was so good.
Yeah. That balanced it out quite a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it was also a precursor to prepare us for Davy Ray.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Rebel's death also was, to me, that was like the moment where Corey lost his innocence.
Carl, by the way, it was Carl.
Carl, the dead kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Corey lost his innocence when he realized what I want is less important than how horrible something is for someone else.
Mhm.
Because at the beginning, like after he prayed, he didn't have any regrets.
Mhm.
He was just like a kid. I want my dog. I've got my dog. My dog can't go.
Yeah.
And he realized after a while, actually, what I want isn't the primary thing. It's not the most important thing right now.
And it's not fair to Rebel.
And it's not fair to Rebel or anyone else around that has to experience this zombie dog. I have to let him go. My question is, do you think that was in the world actually a supernatural event? Or do you think this is how Corey's magical mind is processing a slow death of Rebel's slow death?
Um, a little bit of both, honestly. Memory is a very fallible thing. So I can see considering everything else that had happened up to this point, like I can see that would be like the real thing that happened in the story. Um, but like you've already mentioned, like it's the childhood a childlike view of what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Um, and considering he already reads a bunch of monster magazines and he's obsessed with like horror movies, like I could see him looking at Rebels resurgence, like getting, literally a second life,
Yeah.
and watching him degrade again. I can see him viewing that as like zombie Rebel, whatever. So I don't have an answer for you because if I feel like if I had to decide on what it was, if it was true to the story or something that just Corey envisioned, I think that takes away the gravity and power of that entire scene for me.
Yeah.
Again, for me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I just kind of like take it as it is, experience it, bawl like a goddamn baby. So
Yeah.
and go hug my dog. So
Yeah. 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 Max probably got a lot of hugs out of that book.
he was not happy about me trying to cuddle with him. He was so
Yeah. If only he could read. I have kind of and annoyingly critical mind sometimes. Like I'm a Buddhist, so obviously I'm involved in all sorts of spiritual stuff, but I also have a sort of doubting Thomas kind of mind. And like I said earlier, I was going through the book and I was kind of thinking about each of these supernatural seeming scenes, and some of them, like the kids flying when they get out of school on the last day before summer, that's obviously a feeling translated into an imaginary, they're imagining it, and it's clear in the book there that like that didn't actually physically happen.
Yeah.
But this was the first supernatural thing where there are adults there, and the adults seem freaked out that it happened. Like Rebel was full on dead, and then he wasn't. And he was, I mean, the way it was described, he was fucked up enough. He shouldn't have been alive. Like dogs don't live through that, And it seemed to me the first bit where I was really like, this feels like it really happened this way. Exactly this way. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Rebel came back in some weird way, but he was basically undead for multiple days. But there were plenty of other people who saw it and experienced it. And
so, I mean, maybe you can remind me, or Colton or Kev, if you guys are still in the chat. Did Corey see Rebel after the vet cleaned him up, like stitched him up, put his like organs back in and stuff like that?
You mean before he died? Before he died?
Before he died the first time. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure they kept Corey out of the room and they let him in to see the dead dog.
Like after?
No. He wasn't. Corey was there when he died.
No, I know, but like, so I'm asking, did the vet stitch him up? Because I remember the vet doing work on the dog after he became, zombie dog. But I can't remember if he like stitched up, like put in like his guts back in or whatever, and stitched some stuff up before Corey saw him. Before Corey did his whole prayer and he came back to life or whatever.
I'm not sure exactly
That's the only thing that I can think of, is if he did the work to like stitch him back up, like that could be like hey, we're gonna try and save him or whatever. Because I remember he had the gimpy leg that he just kind of like dragged around after he became a zombie. But
no, I mean that just seemed like and it's interesting because, like I said, that feels like the point where Corey is transitioning from being just a child to being much closer to being an adult, because he realizes his own needs don't go before everything else.
And again, that goes back to, I think we needed that scene from a narrative standpoint. We needed that scene to have the scene with Davy Ray, because he's already experienced. He doesn't want to make Davy Ray what Rebel was.
Yeah. He understands letting go.
Yeah.
A bit better.
And
before we get into Davy Ray, though, you mentioning Davy Ray reminded me of another sort of side character who I was fascinated with. Poor Nemo.
He was there so briefly, and I kept hoping, I'm like, is he gonna come back around?
When's Nemo coming back?
Is he gonna come back? And him just him and his baseball and his such a controlling mother.
Yeah, insanely controlling mother and insanely skilled with a baseball. I mean, he was such a, like, he's almost a nothing character, and I was super attached to him immediately. I was like, he's this poor little wimpy kid who can't speak hardly and like doesn't know how to make friends and everything. And first of all, it was very warming to see Corey and his friends
just take him in.
Just like, okay, you're one of us. I mean, somewhat selfishly, because they were like, oh my God, you can throw a ball. We need you on our team. But still, they're accepting the kid, the kid, and then the what are their names?
Gordo and
Gordo and what's their family name? I can't remember. The two of them come over, and that's also, I think, an important journey in the story, where what's the kid's name? The half Indian kid. Ben?
Johnny.
Is that Ben? No, that's Johnny. Yeah. Where Johnny just snaps eventually and just won't take it anymore. And then Corey also
takes off on his bike, and the other
takes
guy
off his bike
and poison ivy.
It wasn't Corey. It was Rocket.
Yeah.
Led him to that ditch. It's like,
and the bullies get humbled.
Exactly. They back off,
but they are humbled.
Yeah. Also, an important step in growing up, and maybe a bit of a loss of innocence, but they're like, okay, we can only take so much, and then we've got to fight back.
Yeah.
And in a way, it felt like they were fighting back for Nemo as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was that connection with Gordo and his brother, with them terrorizing everyone, including Nemo on the baseball pitch. But yeah, I also miss Nemo. I just wanted him to come back. He was such a cool little dude. And the arm on that kid, as Colton says. So tell me about Davy Ray.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just gonna say that his it's there was nothing. The only magical thing about Davy Ray, that scene when he's dying, is that they don't understand how he's still alive, because he has all the shotgun shell shot in his chest.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I take that back, because I'm remembering. He's dying because he finally saw Snow. Oh gosh, Snow.
Yeah.
I saw him, Snow, whatever it was. Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, that is
Snowdown.
remarkably. Yeah, Snowdown. Yeah, that is a remarkably touching story. Like how Davy seems completely ready to go. Like he has no problem with anything that's happened because he saw Snowdown.
Yep.
And because Snowdown actually exists, and they have proof it's not just a legend. He's the special kid who actually got to see him. Yeah, and Corey being very conscious of, I could keep him because I did it before, but I need to let him go. It's it's such a touching passage, that whole bit.
I'm trying to recall, was it Davy Ray was the last one to fly up after school? He's the one that it took him a bit to get his wings after school.
Oh.
It was Brutton was the town, by the way. I just came across.
That's right, Brutton. Underrated chapter, barbershop talk.
That was also yes, I agree. But yeah, no, I just that the conversation between Corey and Davy Ray, and I'm pretty sure, again, Colton, you could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Davy Ray was the one. He was the last one to get his wings, and there was it's like, hey, if you don't get him now, you gotta go, you gotta jump up, and
yeah,
Davy Ray just saying, I never was afraid of flying, was I? And Corey says, not a bit. And he says, I'm awfully tired, Corey. I don't like being so tired. And Corey says, you ought to rest then. I'll come and see you tomorrow. His being Davy Ray's.
Yeah.
His frown vanished. A smile sneaked across his mouth. Not if I go to the sun tonight. Then I'll have me a suntan and you'll be stuck here shivering. And then at the end, the solitary traveler has left this world. He will not pass this way again. And then later, Corey just laying by his grave
Yeah.
was just getting lost my shit.
Understandably. Yeah. No, I didn't expect beforehand for this to be quite such an emotional book.
Yeah.
You know?
But life is emotional, especially childhood amplified stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think a lot of the fantasy that you and I love, like Realm of the Earthlings, like screw your emotions, like you're in for trouble. Malazan, not so much, which is, I know, not your thing, but it all of this was emotional in a way that a lot of books, I guess, because I read mostly fantasy and occasionally science fiction. It felt like all of this hit harder because it was so much closer to being normal, like normal world. He's a kid, and you can imagine exactly what the town's like that he lives in, and you've seen kids like this kid.
And to reiterate, and I think that's just the command and craft of Robert McCammon, that he's able to capture so truly and so eloquently and so beautifully just the experience of life and all its nuances and aspects. Yes, the graveyard scene when he dreams of leaving on the train, which I think is another, like, it's a singular scene that is representative of his childhood. Like, he could stay in the town where he has to face reality and grow up.
Yeah.
He comes back, dadgummit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, we're an hour and 20 minutes in, and oh my god, I could still talk about this book. I think I liked it a lot.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Do you have time? Are you under time pressure?
I just have to leave by 5, which is in an hour and 45 minutes. But
okay.
Yeah, so it's fine.
I'm totally cool with continuing to talk about the book. I have no time limit or plan.
So I gave this book 5 stars, by the way, just to be clear.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a great book, but I don't think it'll be a favorite of all time. And I think I told Kev that. Because there's just some of those books,
Why
like
not?
Spear Cuts Through Water, that is just like,
really?
No.
You liked Spear Cuts Through Water?
I know, right? Spear Cuts Through Water. But yeah, and it's just, this one has, I don't know, it's so weird. Like, immediately as I'm finishing it, with all the emotional connection and catharsis of it, I'm like, this is definitely 5 stars. This is amazingly crafted. But I keep thinking about this book, and I keep thinking about this book, and it's just stuck with me for ever since I finished it. And
yeah,
I'm gonna paraphrase Kev. If Kev, you're still in the chat, like, this is a book that I will reread probably every 5 years or so to see how, like, just
how your reaction to it has changed.
Yeah, because it is I think this is going to be a classic, like, in 10, 15, 20 years. Like, it's gonna be a classic. And it's just, it's so good. One thing that I keep thinking about, though, that I didn't expect to keep thinking about is Vernon.
Yeah. Vernon.
This you think is a crazy guy, right, who walks around naked around town.
And then they have dinner.
And then they have dinner with Vernon.
Yeah.
And his breakdown of him, like, I think I just feel like I have all my clothes off, that I'm naked. when he is. So he's so literally, emotionally, mentally broken
Yeah.
by the abuse of not only his father, but also just he goes to be an author, and he compromises so much of his work,
Yeah.
and I wonder if this is maybe, like, Robert McCammon inserting himself a little bit, or maybe, like,
He says in the introduction, if you read his introduction,
I did not
as
read the introduction, so
okay, right. So before the preface, there's an introduction, which is Robert McCammon writing as Robert McCammon
in
about,
2008, by the way.
and I think he called it Why I Wrote Boy's Life. Yeah. Um, and he says right at the end of the introduction, he says, if you're wondering, by the way, the character I relate most strongly to isn't Corey, it's Vernon.
There you go. Alright.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this poor man who he wants to get out from under his father's thumb, so he goes to be a writer and to be creative. And the world, the literary world, the publishing world just breaks him down so much, the same way his father did, and the same way his father does afterwards. And this poor man is so broken mentally. But he's the one, like he's the one that's genuinely probably the best character out of, other than like the childlike innocence and the lady. He's the one that forces the town to go help Brunton
Yeah.
during the
Yeah. I
flood.
mean, he, everything's broken except his moral compass,
Mhm.
you know, like
Yeah.
he can't do anything or deal with anything in any kind of normal-ish way, but he knows what's right, and he has no, I mean, maybe in a way because he's put himself outside of society. Like when you're walking around naked and everyone thinks you're crazy because you are, you don't really care about social norms, you don't care about judgment, you don't care about like anything what anyone thinks, and you make sure that things that really are important and need to get done because they're the right thing to do, that somebody starts doing them, you know.
Which is
And
why when he opens the orphanage, like he uses all of his money,
yeah,
his inheritance, to turn that house into an orphanage.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Vernon was like, in a way, I mean, there's a lot of tragedy in the book, and there's a lot of horrible things that happen, and to people that don't seem to deserve it. But Vernon, I think, broke my heart more than anyone else, because he just, it like, it wasn't like what happened to him wasn't a secret Nazi war criminal with
it
an
was the
evil plot,
world.
you
It was
know, like
society
it
and the
was just
world getting in the way.
normal bullshit, like grinding him down, and compromises that he chose to make, you know, that
Because the
he,
publishing industry wanted this, and then when he compromised so much, they're like, "Oh, we don't want this anymore. We move it on to this thing." So
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
what did I do this for then?
that felt very much, I'll read the bit in the introduction where McCammon talks about it. He says, the character I most closely identify with in Boy's Life, you probably already know. It's Vernon, whose dream ended because he was broken by the weight of a chart on the wall, because he did not stand up in that office in New York, because he came home to Zephyr without a fight and closed his eyes to the world beyond. He woke up and he was still alive. I've always wanted to use that line somewhere. This seems like the right place. Yeah, he, that whole bit, like Vernon telling his story, was the most, the strongest bit, where I was like, okay, this is Robert McCammon kind of making a point, You know,
Yeah.
like he's telling us about the publishing industry. He's telling us about experiences he's had. He's telling us about experiences that are probably pretty universal for a lot of authors. And this one just broke Vernon, and luckily not Robert McCammon.
Yeah.
Although who knows? I don't know where he lives. And I don't know if he wears clothes. So, you know, he could be Vernon, but I think he's probably got his life together a bit more than Vernon. Yeah, and it's like in spite of everything, the love in a way that Vernon still has for Zephyr, like he built the entire town, including all of the people, and not just he put people in the town, but he put the actual people from the town in his miniature town. You know, and I mean, I guess in a way that's maybe also you could see it as having control over the town in a way that he can't. But it also you've got to have a lot of love for it to do something like that.
Yeah.
You know, like
Which
building the entire town.
I think the one open thread that was never resolved is, where was Vernon's dad? Was he actually dead?
That was an enduring mystery. I came down on the side of he's dead. It just, I don't know. It just seemed so pointed at so many times that I think I totally forget the guy's name, but the servant who was basically taking care of Vernon. Luckily, he seemed to actually be a good guy.
Yeah. And he cared about
And
Vernon.
he actually cared about Vernon. And I think my sort of hypothesis, I mean, it's not clear or stated in the book, but my kind of hypothesis was that guy was keeping it secret so that Vernon didn't have to step into any kind of complications he couldn't deal with. He didn't have to step into any responsibility. That guy was just kind of silently managing the money so that Vernon would be taken care of and he wouldn't have to have any kind of stress, you know. But it's a hard thing to do, like considering that the guy was this big businessman and owned all the stuff all over town, and you know.
So I will say that just a thought popped in my head. It is a really simple and direct depiction, and I would say thesis statement of like the people that power. What is it? Power corrupts power absolutely. Whatever that phrase is.
Power corrupts absolute. Power corrupts absolutely.
Thank you. So those in power and with money can do great things, or they can do bad things. To paraphrase Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. And because Vernon doesn't have the I would say adult, he doesn't have the responsibilities of, you know, financial stuff. He doesn't have to worry about a house. He has the privilege, as it were. He is able to focus on the actual good that should be done. So helping Brutton during the flood, opening the orphanage, and I mean it's a very simplistic depiction, I think, or maybe overgeneralization on my part, of those with privilege have the best opportunities to do the best things for society. Because you see,
Yeah.
like the KKK members, they're all doing like they've got jobs and they've got like mortgages, whatever, and they're awful fucking people.
Yeah, and they feel no responsibility for
Yeah, their
even
fellow man. Yeah,
anyone else. Like, and I thought that was also very telling that the two KKK guys, one of them gets stuck under a bomb, and his buddy comes up and is like, "Oh shit, I'm not
yeah.
staying here. Like, I'm getting out of town. Like, this is, see ya." So yeah, no, I mean, the Vernon is a good. I mean, even stretching my head canon a little further, I think what happened is Vernon's carer, I don't remember his name, killed the father.
Probably because he saw what he was doing to Vernon.
Exactly. The father came out and hit Vernon or was yelling at him for half an hour or something. And the other guy just went, you know what? Vernon's such a good kid. I'm going to take care of him from now on. You're trash, and killed him. Nothing in the book suggests that happened. Yeah. But I think I think it's what should have happened.
McCammon is a very dark writer when you read more of his work. Well, I'm reading Swan Song in September, so...
Right. Rogue wants to know if this is our book of the year so far.
It is a book of the year for me so far. I've read a lot of really good books this year.
I'm just thinking... I would say, well, it's definitely up there. No question.
I mean, what would be my book of the year so far, actually?
I don't even really know myself. I mean, certainly Never Let Me Go by Ishiguro I liked a lot. Not as much as this, not as much as Boy's Life, I would say.
I think there would be like, so tier ranking. Spoiler alert for my 6-month tier ranking video. I would say Boy's Life, The Iliad, Titus Grown, and Happy Place.
Okay.
Hey, I did it the European way. Are you proud of me? So.
Well done. Yeah. Colton thinks he was dead too. McCammon's dark when you read more of his work. Yeah. I mean, there was a fair bit of dark stuff in this as well, but like overall, especially because it's a boy's life, it wasn't that dark. But for example, the murder, like when his dad dives down and really sees what has happened in the car, and the guy has been strangled with piano wire or baling wire, actually, and handcuffed to the wheel of a car, which is being pushed into an extremely deep lake. I mean, that's pretty dark. But overall, I wouldn't say that. Well, I mean, yeah, Zombie Rebel is pretty dark as well. Overall, the tone of the book didn't feel that dark. But yeah. Anyway, I think we've covered a lot. I don't know if anyone in the chat has any questions or things that they wanted us to discuss or bring up. But I think that's a lot to say about a book. It was, in case you didn't get it, we both thought it was good. Quite good.
Great, even.
Yeah, even maybe great. Yeah. I don't have Swan Song lined up. I have Speaks the Nightbird lined up. It's a complete 2-part novel, now in 1 volume, apparently. And it's got a Stephen King quote on it. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, this is mostly based on John Minton Talking Story saying insanely good things about it, and then Colton backing all of it up.
Colton, I thought Boy's Life was your Spear Cuts Through Water. What is happening?
Swan Song is to you what Spear Cuts Through Water is. Super excited for yeah. I'm interested to read it. I really liked The Stand by Stephen King. And I mean, 2 authors that could get compared all the time have both written a post-apocalyptic novel. Of course, you want to kind of compare those in your head as well. Maybe I'll get Swan Song and read it before I start another long series. Like, I'm so hesitant to pick up another series that has more than 3 books in it. But it sounds like it's awesome. So I'm a little, yeah.
So I guess my final thought is I just love that Corey's daughter finds Johnny's arrowhead that he lost. And she asks, "Can I keep it, Dad?" And he says, "I believe you ought to." I tell her, and she eagerly pushes the arrowhead down into the pocket of her jeans like a secret treasure. You see, it's a girl's life too. And at that point, I was like, table flipping in joy. It was great. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
And actually, so, oh my God, I just put the two together.
What?
So the daughter's name is Sky. His daughter's name in real life is Sky.
I mean, it's basically him writing about his childhood. Like, it's not that far. I mean, he's created a
character, yeah.
A character of Corey Mackinson, but yeah, it's pretty.
Honestly, now hearing like your mention about the introduction and how he relates more to Vernon, I have a feeling. Well, I assume any author puts aspects of themselves into their work. I would be interested to see like what aspects of himself he put into what character. Like, obviously, Vernon is the writer aspect. Corey's maybe the child, and I don't know. Is the dad like maybe some of his like the mother's like his anxieties, or I don't know. But I'm not gonna try and psychoanalyze the poor man.
No,
because this is a great work, Dad. Gummit regardless. So
it is. I will. I've kind of put it next to Something Wicked This Way Comes for me, like you said about Boy's Life. When I read Something Wicked This Way Comes, I got about halfway through, and I was already like, I'm going to read this again, like more than once. Like, this is going to be a book. However long I live, I'm going to read it probably every couple of years, which is why I bought a nice edition of it, because I was like, I want to have like a good copy of it on my shelf. But this one's probably up there with it. I don't know if I'll buy a special edition or anything, but yeah. Swan songing it up here in the chat with Rogue and Colton. Maybe I'll have to pick that up. I mean, my TBR right now is basically finish this cinder block of a novel, Reaper's Gale. I'm about halfway, a bit past halfway through, so I'm not doing too bad. And next month, which is only in a couple of days, we're starting a Lonesome Dove read-along on the Fireside Discord. Joanna and I have wanted to read it for a while, and we were like, okay, let's push and see if other people are interested. And I think there's about, I don't know, 8 or 10 or something people who've sort of put up their hand and said they'll read it with us. So that'll be interesting. And that is such a thick book. I will not be reading anything but this book and that book until at least the end of July, maybe longer. We'll see. So I'll be alternating between my two really extremely thick books. And also on the side, I mean, could talk about it more in the pub tomorrow, but I'm reading this, which is a nonfiction book about I think 10 or 12 television shows that, is it? Yeah, it's basically 12. The television shows that around the turn of the century kind of completely changed the television landscape, like Sopranos, Breaking Bad. That was much earlier.
Oh.
Much earlier. Like I Love Lucy was 60s, 70s. We're talking late 90s.
Oh.
Like in the 90s.
Buffy,
The Wire, Buffy, Breaking Bad, Lost, Sopranos, those kind of things. Yeah. So it's interesting. And it's a very good like palate cleanser, like switch off from Malazan weirdness and complicated stories and just like it's like this. and just read one chapter about one show, which is really interesting with some behind the scenes stuff, and it's nice. Anyway, that's more of Sunday Pub Talk. Thank you very much, Evie, for reading this with me.
Thank you for giving it to
chat.
me, explaining it to me.
Yeah.
And thank you, Colton, and thank you, Kev, if you all are still in the chat. Thank you for pushing this on my radar.
Yeah, Colton is not Colton, McCammon has definitely made it onto my list of authors I want to read more of. And like I needed that. I just bought all of the books that Ishiguro ever wrote. So I'm like set to read Ishiguro until the end of next year already. So yeah, and thank you everybody in the chat. It has been a pleasure. It's always fun to talk with Evie and to chat with the chatters about good books. And this is a pretty awesome book. I'm glad we both. Okay. John Minton is not a fake fan.
Dropping in as we're leaving.
Last minute, John. It was so close. Like 5 minutes, you would have been a fake fan. Congratulations, John Minton, for scraping in at the last second to prove his McCammon fandom. Yeah, I'm very happy for you, John. I'm proud of you.
TLDR version, we both loved it, John. So.
Yeah. All you need to know is we both loved it and gushed about it for like an hour and 3/4 almost. So that's all you need to know. You can watch the replay. Yeah. Love you too, John and Colton and Rogue and Kev and everybody who is in the chat. And we will see you again soon. For example, tomorrow, starting at the same time, is the Sunday Pub, which is every week at the same time on this channel. So maybe see you in the pub tomorrow. Bye, everybody.